What's going on, guys? Apathettic here with all your tips, recommendations, and everything in between. And in today's video, we are discussing some of the most OP fragments I've seen in Destiny in some time. And given how powerful Stasis already is, that's saying something. So with Season of the Splicer, we got some new aspects and fragments that take our ability regen and survivability on Stasis to a whole different level. So I'm going to show you guys the fragments you want to grab, how they synergize to allow you to constantly get an overshield, melee energy, and a damage boost that allows you to 2-tap. And that's right, I did say overshield. But before that, I also have a Discord for people looking to team up, discuss builds, or ask questions. So consider joining the Discord using the link below if you're looking to connect with some like-minded Destiny players. With that, let's get into it. Getting into the aspect and fragments you're going to want to be using to get that damage boost and to get that overshield that we talked about in the intro, we got to start with the new aspect, Glacial Harvest. Freezing targets create stasis shards around the frozen targets. Higher tier combatants create more shards. This is very similar to what Titan and Hunter have had for a long time, where when they would destroy their glacial nades, it would create those shards that you could then pick up and give you back some melee energy. For Warlock, it gives you about 20% melee energy, which is not an amazing amount, nothing that's groundbreaking per se in of itself, but it does still help with that cooldown of getting Penumbral Blast. And the important thing to remember here is when you freeze targets, which is amazing for Warlock, because with Penumbral Blast and Cold Snap, which is what the grenade I recommend to run on Shadebinder, we're going to be getting freezes a lot of the time. And then when you throw in Iceflare bolts for when you get that freeze, it spawns another Cold Snap grenade essentially to get an additional freeze. So you could be looking at from 2 to 4 shards, because you get 2 shards each time you freeze an enemy. And so this is going to allow you to get multiple shards with Iceflare bolts. And so, well, Glacial Harvest, this aspect is awesome, but it's not necessarily the groundbreaking part of these new aspects and fragments. We have to move on to these new fragments that are available, starting with Whisper of Conduction. Nearby stasis shards track to your position and gives you plus 10 resilience and plus 10 intellect. So this is where it really starts to begin in terms of the synergy that you're going to see between these aspects and fragments on Warlock. And so now those same shards that you would create when freezing enemies, instead of them just sitting there, they now track and float over to you, similar to the remnants you would see when you get kills with Thorn, where it tracks over to you and then you absorb it and get the benefit. This is that same exact thing, which is incredibly useful, because now instead of having to stop what we're doing and make a conscious, intentional effort to slide through these shards, now they will just float over to us. So now you can get the freeze, get your shards, and get the melee energy benefit on top of being able to continue to fight or take on that 1v1 duel without having to stop what you're doing. And what's also nice, like I mentioned, is that boost to the resilience and intellect. That's basically a free tier of intellect and resilience. So now we can divert our stats into discipline or strength to get our Penumbral Blast and Cold Snap back even faster. And so you could see just between Iceflare bolts and Cold Snap Penumbral Blast, we're gonna be creating a lot of shards, and all these shards are now gonna be tracking to us and allowing us to get our Penumbral Blast back even faster. But now this is where the synergy continues. Moving on to Whisper of Rime. Whisper of Rime. Collecting a stasis shard grants a small amount of overshield, which falls off after 10 seconds. Collecting additional shards adds to the overshield and refreshes the timer. So now, as we're freezing our opponents and they are creating those shards which are floating to us, we are now going to be getting an overshield. And now what I'll mention is those first 2 shards, it's going to be a small amount of overshield, and to get into full overshield on Warlock, you're going to need about 8 shards. And then once you get those 8 shards, you're going to have it for that overshield for 10 seconds. Keeping in mind that each time you get 1 shard, that 10-second timer restarts or refreshes, on top of the fact that we're getting that melee energy. And even when you get the smallest amount, so say you only get 2 shards, which gives you that small amount of overshield, that is still a huge benefit. Do not underestimate the benefit of that little amount of overshield, because there were multiple times where I was in 1v1 gunfights or in shotgun battles where I was sliding through, and after I would freeze someone, would kill them, get a little bit of overshield, and go into my next fight right away, and I would literally survive with a sliver of health, knowing that if I didn't have that little sliver of overshield that I gotten from the previous fight, that I most likely would have either lost or at the very least traded with that opponent. And now where this continues is if you think about our Shadebinder super, where you're constantly freezing opponents, creating those shards, and they're going to be tracking over to you, and they're going to be getting your overshield while in Shadebinder. So if this tracking and AoE effect of Shadebinder weren't enough and didn't make it harder enough to kill, now when you get those kills, you're going to be getting an active overshield that lasts 10 seconds and is continually refreshing as you're getting multiple of those freezes, which is just absolutely insane on Shadebinder. Makes this up that super incredibly powerful and difficult to go against. And then by the time you're out of your super, there are going to be a lot of times where you're going to have full overshield coming out of your super, thanks to Whisper of Rime and Whisper of Conduction bringing those shards to you. And then on top of that, we want to make sure we're using Whisper of Hedrons. This has been known about for a very long time, but now when we come out of our super, or we at the very least get a freeze, we're getting that melee ability regen, we're getting that overshield, and then now we're getting that almost 25% damage boost still, and then allowing us to 2-tap with an overshield. Essentially, between Iceflare bolts, Glacial Harvest, Whisper of Conduction, Whisper of Rime, and Whisper of Hedrons, you're essentially becoming a juggernaut in the Crucible when running Shadebinder, with how often we're getting our freezes, and then with Iceflare bolts, chaining those freezes to multiple people. You're gonna find a lot of scenarios where you're gonna be having that overshield, and the fact that you don't have to stop what you're doing to grab those shards will simply come to you. And as you're also freezing opponents, you are also getting that 25% damage boost. So the synergy between these aspects and these fragments that we've talked about today is absolutely mind-blowing. It makes it so hard to choose a light subclass over Stasis, especially on Warlock. You could pretty much say about any subclass right now, but especially on Warlock, with the synergy you have between all your freezing abilities, Iceflare bolts, and the fact that those shards will track to you, there's almost zero downside, on top of the fact that the fragment Whisper of Conduction actually boosts your stats on top of everything we've already talked about. Makes running Shadebinder an absolute no-brainer, with not to mention the fact that Top Tree Dawnblade has had its ability to Icarus Dash out of stasis nerfed. It has only made Shadebinder rise to the top of all the Warlock subclasses, or is already close, but now is clearly at the top, especially when you look at the kind of synergy we're seeing here on this subclass. It's absolutely no-brainer, guys. I know it's probably frustrating to see a Bungie put out fragments like this for those of us that don't like Stasis, but keep in mind these updates or developments were probably done way before the feedback on Stasis actually came down. But I highly recommend, if you like running Stasis and you feel like you don't have another choice, which you pretty much don't at this point, these are the aspects and fragments I would recommend running. But let me know in the comments down below what other builds or awesome synergy have you found while running Stasis. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, as they're all free ways to support me. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.